The difference between the mundane and the supramundane practice. Nowadays, both in China and Tibet, many people identify themselves as Buddhists, lay practitioners, or monastics. They often participate in the activity of liberating animals or practice prostrations and the 5 extraordinary preliminaries. Many feel proud that they practice every day. However, if you look closely at the motivations, you will find that quite a few practice only for their own benefits in this life, such as health, longevity, or the removal of a life-threatening obstacle. Others hope for a favorable rebirth in the God or human realm just because they fear suffering in the 3 lower realms, the realms of hell, hungry ghosts, and animals. But any form of practice undertaken with these kinds of selfish motivation is considered, at best, a mundane practice. Furthermore, we should not think of burning incense and doing prostration as being mundane, whereas listening to the teachings of Madhyamaka or the Great Perfection is supramundane. The distinction between the two is simply not about form. Take the example of offering butter lamp to the 3 jewels. Given the same object of offering, act of offering, and person who offers, the practice will be deemed mundane when renunciation is not generated and the purpose of the offering is to obtain worldly benefits like health, longevity, job promotion, wealth, and so on, or a favorable rebirth. Conversely, offering lamp out of true renunciation and to seek liberation from samsara will be considered a supramundane practice. Therefore, the gauge for distinguishing the mundane from the supramundane is no other than whether one has renounced worldly pursuits or not. The Great Perfection itself is deemed supramundane, but our motivation for practicing it or listening to its teachings could turn it into a mundane practice instead. If our motivation were to gain benefits in this or next life, the teaching of the Great Perfection would cease to be supramundane upon entering our mind stream. It would not even be a Mahayana practice. What would it be then? It would just be a mundane practice or a practice of mundane great perfection. What kind of practice is animal liberation? That also depends on your motivation. Even if the motivation is for a rebirth in the God or human realm, or to avoid rebirth in the 3 lower realms, rather than for health or longevity in this life, liberating animal is still just a mundane activity. To liberate animals for one's own freedom from samsara is viewed as a supramundane Theravada practice. To do it out of bodhicitta, the wish to attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings, is a supramundane Mahayana practice. To couple the Mahayana practice with some Vajrayana views essentially makes animal liberation a Vajrayana practice. Therefore, we must carefully examine and ask ourselves, what is the purpose of my years of participation in animal liberation? Did I do it mainly for my own benefit? If the intention is to attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings, then our action is undoubtedly a supramundane practice. If we liberate animals in the hope of attaining our own longevity, or a healthy human rebirth with long life, or a rebirth in Amitabha's pure land for ourselves, the actual intended beneficiary is really just us, while it may appear that animals are being helped by our action. Other actions should be examined in this way as well. Is going to a Buddhist institute or other places to receive empowerment or Buddhist teachings a mundane or supramundane practice? As we just said, if it is for our own benefit or to avoid either physical or mental suffering in this or future life, it is a mundane practice. Why? This is because our action comes from a worldly motivation. To be more specific, all thoughts and actions will be deemed mundane if they are motivated as such. What is a supramundane practice? Where do we draw the line between the mundane and the supramundane? Supramundane practices are encompassed in both Mahayana and Theravada traditions. Unbeknown to many, even practicing Theravada requires renunciation as a prerequisite. When virtuous actions are being executed out of genuine renunciation, they are deemed supramundane practices. What does the word renounce mean? First, to renounce is to forsake all worldly concerns. In other words, to renounce is not to have any attachment to worldly things, and at the same time, to be fully aware of the suffering nature of samsara. Second, one must endeavor to seek liberation from all suffering. To lead a renounced life as a monastic monk or nun connotes the same meaning as one must leave home behind to pursue ultimate liberation. Home, in this sense, represents the secular world. It is not enough a clear evidence that one has renounced all worldly attachment by just walking out of one's home and putting on a monastic robe. One must also have developed a genuine sense of revulsion toward samsara. For lay people, cultivating renunciation also means not to be covetous of worldly things. Non-Buddhists cultivate renunciation as well. Many non-Buddhist monks or clergies do not wish to remain in samsara. They too seek liberation. However, lacking the right view, theirs are not considered true renunciation. What then is the right view? It is a firm conviction of the suffering of samsara to a degree that one no longer harbors any desire for samsara and wholeheartedly seeks liberation from it. At the same time, one must also cultivate the transcendent wisdom that is implicit in the ultimate liberation. To seek liberation blindly, without grasping the inherent wisdom, will not bring forth a complete renunciation. The Four Noble Truths of the Theravada tradition is a part of this wisdom, and complete renunciation entails mastery of the Four Noble Truths. Once having developed genuine renunciation, all the virtuous actions that one undertakes will be deemed supramundane. It is stated in the Abhidharma Kosha Shastra that one enters the path of Theravada after having successfully cultivated renunciation. Here, entering the path means taking the first step of learning the Theravada tradition. It shows just how vitally important renunciation is. The four general preliminary practices of contemplating the preciousness of human birth, impermanence of phenomena, suffering, being the nature of samsara, and infallible karma are greatly conducive to cultivating renunciation. But many so-called Buddhists are reluctant to practice the preliminaries, particularly these general preliminaries. Rather, they want to skip all of them and go straight to the practice of the great perfection, Mahamudra, and other similarly profound teachings. Frankly, there is no need to make exception for Tibetan monks, but this tendency is much more common among lay Buddhists in China. The great perfection and Mahamudra are indeed supreme practices. What should be questioned is whether one has the requisite capacity and if the mind has been properly tuned. One cannot hope to succeed in either of the practices if unable to give positive answers to these two questions. What then are the methods we can use to train our minds? They are the four general preliminary practices, and their importance should not be treated lightly. Centuries ago, Venerable Atisha and many eminent practitioners in Tibet attained supreme accomplishments with nothing but contemplation of precious human birth and impermanence throughout their lives. They are our role models, and we should do likewise. Those unwilling to practice the preliminaries, yet hoping to stride far on first try, will never be able to reach the final goal of liberation, just as if they were blocked from reaching the end of a journey by the numerous high mountain passes. The following example should further illustrate this point. Once there was an accomplished master. A disciple went up to him for one more profound instruction before taking leave of the master. The master said, "I do not have any better teaching." After offering all his possessions to his master, he pleaded again. The master, holding the disciple's hand, said sincerely, "You will die. I will die too. Do take some time to reflect on this. My master taught me this, and it is what I have practiced. My master did not give me any other teaching, nor have I practiced any other. This is it, the best pith instruction that I know of. Now go and practice it diligently." It is really this simple. You will die, and I will die too. We all know this indisputable truth, yet we seem to keep forgetting it. It is thus able for each of us to deeply contemplate this teaching, for nothing will come out of our practice otherwise. Many people are convinced that what they practice must be of supramundane nature. How can it not be if they've been practicing the 5 extraordinary preliminaries? In fact, these 5 preliminaries are not only supramundane in nature, but also part of the Mahayana practices. The key is, notwithstanding, having what kind of perspective when you sit down to practice these preliminaries. Though the possibility of practicing solely for the benefit of this life is slim, it is quite likely to undertake these practices to avoid rebirth in the hell realm. If the motivation is not to seek liberation for the sake of all sentient beings, the practice of the 5 preliminaries will be considered mundane, not supramundane. In that case, it won't be so meaningful to practice the 5 preliminaries after all. We all know that chanting mantras repetitively and doing 5-point prostrations require tremendous mental and physical efforts. If, in the end, the outcome of our practice is viewed as not being in accordance with the principles of Vajrayana, Mahayana, or Theravada tradition, but is categorized as being mundane instead, it will be a real pity. Many of us had received empowerment from His Holiness Khenpo Jigme Phuntsuk Rinpoche, and are also fortunate enough to have learned many precious Buddhist teachings. These are not casual encounters. If we were to let them become just ordinary mundane affairs, they would lend no help to our quest for liberation. Even if we do manage to gain some benefits later on as a result of these encounters, which perhaps temporarily satisfy our worldly yearnings, liberation, on the other hand, will forever be lost. That would be regretful, wouldn't you think? So keep in mind of the preciousness of this human birth. Don't waste this life in neglect and ignorance and miss the one chance for seeking freedom from samsara. In order to succeed, we must first begin by cultivating renunciation. Failing that, neither meditation nor mantra chanting can ever be deemed supramundane practice through which ultimate liberation can be attained. This is extremely important. Renunciation is the prerequisite to bodhicitta. Without complete renunciation, genuine bodhicitta can never be aroused.